Hey, don't click away, please. Listen, I really have an important message to tell you all. And I want to first start off by saying, thank you for tuning in. This week on the Up and Adams show, we did something a little different. Me and Mike sat down with somebody who's an American hero. This person has done so much for the world and has had so many different jobs, whether it's being a politician, a lifeguard, a teacher, a prison guard, a yoga instructor, a masseuse, and a stepmom. And I want to pay tribute to this person. So let's bow our heads. Let's all thank Lisa fucking Ann, ladies and gentlemen. Lisa Ann. Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. We have an amazing episode. I don't even need to introduce this person. You guys know and love who this person is, Lisa Ann. Guys, I hope you enjoy this episode. Me and Mike had a great conversation with her, and I hope you all enjoy. Please subscribe and like this YouTube video, and let's get right into this week's episode.
Nice to meet you guys.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
Thank you so much for doing this.
By the way, I'm a fucking addicted to the hardcore Italian on Twitter. So you realize I'm Instagram. So you probably saw me psychopath the other night, like liking like 100 posts. But I laid in bed for like 2 hours and I watched them all because it was the first time it started to really populate my feed. And I got so sucked in because I'm Italian. I completely understand all. And I mean, the music, the voicemail from Nana, like all of the things. I spent a month in Italy and one of my best friends lives there. So I get to go regularly and see her. And it's like, it's all so true. All of it.
Yeah, I want to ask you a lot of questions about your Italian background because I had no idea all these years you were Italian. Where you, do you know where your roots are from in Italy?
I have northern and southern roots. My grandfather on my mom's side is from northern Italy. So I've got that 6'5", had a 6'5" grandfather who then came over, Ellis Island, landed in Brooklyn, and then worked for the White House and as well served in the military. He met my grandmother, who's French Canadian, who was working for the Canadian government at the White House. And I have this photo of them. They met sitting and sharing a newspaper every day before work on this bench. And so they had this photo that they gave to me before they passed away. And then on my dad's side, Sicily straight up, straight Sicilians. Nobody's taller than 5 feet. I'm maxing out at 5'1.5". I say 5'2". But the wedding photo for my parents is so great because the table looks like it's tilted. My mom's side of the family all has considerable height. And then it just goes down to my Nana at the end, who was like 4'10", and it's beautiful.
Well, you know what? I can relate to that because I'm Italian as well. I'm Calabrese, and I'm 5'6".
Yeah, see, 5'6", I consider tall because I'm like 5'4" and 3/4", but I just say 5'5", like you do.
Of course,
too,
we're all gonna round up. Okay, we're gonna round up like the IRS. We're rounding up.
Exactly, but that's a cool story. And tell me about when you've been to Italy too. Was that like when you were working, or was that just something unrelated?
So I've gone a ton of times just on holiday, right? Just for vacation. It's a beautiful place to go. So many different. You can go to somewhere different in Italy every year and explore, but 2018, I got invited to go for a month to do weekend events. So I would be working on Friday and Saturday. But the great thing was I had Monday through Thursday to go wherever I wanted. So I came in, landed in Milan, departed out of Rome, and I just knew where I needed to be close to. So I would travel those 4 days in between. One trip I left and went to visit a friend who lives in the Czech Republic. But I went everywhere. I love the small private islands off of Venice. Most people go to Venice, they stay in touristy Venice, and no, you take the water taxi to a really awesome private island where there's only one hotel there. You stay there. You're treated like royalty. And then when you want to go into Venice, you take the water taxi and you walk as far as you can until everyone at the restaurant is not only speaking Italian, but also smoking cigarettes. Once you've reached that spot, that's where you order your gnocchi and it will change your life. So you got to be willing to get lost because a lot of the streets, it's all like, you just got to be able to see like St. Mark's, right? You can see that little statue. You're like, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to get back. But you can never eat in the tourist center. You have to walk at least 50. Even in Rome, I did the same thing. I just said, okay, I'm going to walk 15 to 20 minutes away from everyone else and find places that look that are authentic and where it's locals eating and their dog is sitting next to them, and it's just amazing. The food, the people, and I just really love their pace of life. Like, you don't have great Wi-Fi, so you don't upload your photos to Instagram till you get back to your hotel and you get on better Wi-Fi. So your phone's just away because it's more frustrating to look at the spinning wheel than it is to actually get out there and live your life.
That's the whole point.
Yeah.
I think people like, well, you know, because being in North America, it's always go, go, go. And in Italy, like my cousins and you know, over in Calabria, they're so relaxed. If you call them and say, hey, how's work?
So offensive. What do you care about work? Why don't you ask about me?
Yeah,
what did
exactly.
I eat today? Who am I seeing later? What's
Why
been
don't you
going on in the
see
family?
this?
Who died in the neighborhood? You know what I mean? Like, what's going on? Yes, those are the things that are important.
Lifestyle's definitely very different. And yeah, that's why we were going to ask you too, like, as far as a sex life too in Italy, what would you say compares there to America?
No, I think the intention behind sex here is very different than there. Very different than anywhere out of the US. I mean, intentionally here, you know, dudes just do it to do it. You know, people just do it to say they did it. Whereas in other countries, it's more intimate. It's not just this thank you, ma'am, you know, bam, bam, thank you, ma'am kind of thing. It's more of a connection. The men are a lot more romantic. So there's a lot more patience. And there's also a lot more soft petting, caressing, intimacy, just in public, holding hands. Like, one thing you'll notice there is every couple walking together is holding hands and constantly touching each other. And that's just so different, because when you come back here and you sit at a restaurant, people seem very disconnected. Like, even if they're not on their phone, you can see an invisible wall between them. That over there, you know, I was in Florence for a week. I went for sale week. So it's like the greatest week to be there, right? So I'm in there for sale week. I make a friend. I see a girl walking, holding a takeout coffee cup in Italy. And I yelled across the corridor. I was sitting on church steps, just people watching. And I said, where'd you get the coffee? And she looked at me. She goes, you speak English. And so she was from Toronto. She had just called off her wedding last minute, and she was on her honeymoon by herself. And I said to her, a small rule to you, don't walk down the street drinking a coffee. It makes you look like a tourist. You know what I mean? Like, you just don't do that in Italy. You go to the coffee bar, you stand there, you drink it out of a ceramic cup like a normal person, and you walk away. And by the third day, we had corralled this huge group of people. Most people were from there. They spoke a little English, but by our last night, we had the whole outdoor restaurant to ourselves, and every single person that came in, it was like being at a family reunion. You got up, you hugged, you stopped. Like, it was just this, people are more intimate there. They touch more. And I just think people are very cold here, and the only purpose they touch for is sex.
It's funny, me and Mike were actually doing some research, and like online it says that Italians make for the best lovers, right? And you just
Of course.
Yeah, there's a lot of polls.
Yeah, and honestly, what I like about what you just said, it goes back to what me and Mike are always really passionate about, is the Italian roots, right? How we're so family oriented. Even when you see somebody, you know, you go up for a hug, you kiss them.
Yes.
There's just a feeling, and I think it has to do with mainstream media here, the perception of sex and like what true love really is. Movies do that as well. They kind of misinterpret what it actually should be. But in Italy, it's like you just said, who's on their phone in Italy? You're enjoying the ocean. You're enjoying the food.
It's actually rude. It's actually very rude. The only people you see at a restaurant or walking down the street on their phone is Americans, and they're loud and they're annoying. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm one of them. You know, I think it has to do with media, but I also think it has to do with what you were raised with. So I still, you know, I had 35 first cousins growing up in Easton, Pennsylvania. So we had, you know, every weekend you were booked. You either had a funeral, a wedding, confirmation. You know, you were always going to family gatherings. And so we loved being around this large group. And so we saw a lot of love. You saw your aunts and uncles that loved each other and they loved their children. And I think we're very disconnected with our family in the U.S. because people are working more. They've often moved away from where their family lives. Maybe kids see their grandparents twice a year on vacation when they fly across the state to visit. Whereas in an Italian family, you see your grandparents every Sunday. It's no questions asked. I don't care what else you got going on. If your basketball practice is scheduled for Sunday, you don't go, okay? Sundays, you see your family. You see your grandparents. So I think the level of intimacy and sex and how things are so different has a lot to do with how you feel about the people that you surround yourself with, the people you're excited to see, the people you definitely want to hug and you definitely want to be around. It's very more face forward than being disconnected by all of the elements that we think here we're raised to believe are important. But when you spend a month straight in Italy, you see what actually is important.
100%. And you think that was kind of like a break for you just with your job to be going there? Or is it kind of like, how is it compared to the industry? You know, was it like refreshing, or is it kind of you're working with the same people a lot? So
no, it was
kinda
very
close.
refreshing, and it was an eye-opening experience for me that really triggered something and made me realize that I want to retire in another country. So since there, kind of, I've been unraveling my life. In 2019, I completed a minimalist project of getting rid of 75% of my life. I sold my house. I moved to New York City to be in an apartment, so it'd be easier to get back and forth to Europe. Now, mind you, I didn't know the world was going to close. That kind of threw a wrench in this whole plan, but
Yeah.
it is where I'm forward thinking. I have a very good friend who lives in Italy. She moved there 10 years ago. I get to Skype with her and sit and chat, and I get to see her where she lives and how she lives. And I just really like how she knew her daughter was 3 years old at the time, and she wanted her daughter to have a more fulfilling life. And so moving there was a way to accomplish that. She ended up meeting a man there who's lovely. They're happily married, and they have a nice group of people around them. It was just different. It was different for me to be reminded that what's most important is the human experience, not your stuff.
You're considering moving to Italy, or just
So
United
I
States?
love Italy would be my first choice, but I'm also thinking about taxes and everything else. And Portugal has the absolute best digital nomad program, which, by the way, New Year's Day 2022, the buy-in goes up 200 grand. It's the largest increase they've ever had on their buy-in. Goes up 200 grand, but it has a lot of good tax protections, so you're not getting double tax on paying the income from what you're getting paid from an American company. And that's something I really have to think about. But no matter what, I will be spending. I will have a place. I was hoping by 50, which will be next year. So now it seems a bit rushed with how it's been. But I'm hoping that in the next couple of years, I have a place and I just start using it as a back and forth. And then eventually I'll be over there full time.
That's awesome. And you know what? I have to say, like, and this is a great compliment. Like, you do not look even close to 50 at all. I'm shocked when you say that.
I'm shocked too. I don't know how this happens. Like, all of a sudden your birthdays just start ticking by. You know what I mean? Like, I'm shocked too. And that's why I feel like I could kind of live a longer life over there because people enjoy their life more, right? So I feel like I can slow things down, but Italy is my first choice.
That's awesome.
I could live in Sicily, Palermo. I really liked Apoglia was a really pretty little city. Padova is a great little city. I don't want to be in a main tourist area, but I wouldn't mind being close to one. It's so easy to get anywhere by train there.
Oh, for
Do
sure.
anything.
Literally, yeah. And going back to how great you look for your age and stuff like that. You know, I did a lot of research on you. Me and Mike both did, and you're a very athletic person. I even saw you post on your Instagram. You know, every morning you go play basketball. You
Shoot
get
hoops
exercise.
5 days a week. It's my secret pleasure. You know what I mean? I've been playing basketball since I was a kid. But I was lucky. You know, I fell into the fitness lifestyle when I first got in the industry. The first company I had a contract with, they hired me a nutritionist and a personal trainer. How ahead of the time. In the early 90s, they wanted me to lose about 20 pounds because the camera adds 20 pounds. We were shooting on film back then, so it wasn't as forgiving. And I was like, okay. And I learned about food. I ate foods. I never had an avocado. I never had sushi, of course, coming from a small town in Pennsylvania. There were so many things that weren't in my Italian Americanized diet. So there was a lot of pierogies, a lot of mozzarella sticks, a lot of things, right? So a lot of cheese, which is still my guilty pleasure, right?
Me too.
How could you live without it, right? And breads. So that really stuck with me. I realized how much better I felt when I was working out every day. I realized how much happier I was. I realized it just really kicks in your wellness, where when you work out, you automatically eat better. You're automatically more tired, so you sleep better. Like, it's just this beautiful, vicious cycle.
It is. And like, even, well, I'm pretty unathletic, and I don't have the best diet, but again, I'm skinny, so you can't even tell. That's the beauty about it sometimes. Like, where do I even put all this food, right? You know, I really want to touch upon, because you're a legend in the industry, obviously. Everyone knows that. And, you know, I was going to ask you how you got into the industry, but I think a better question to ask, and I think many people are curious about, is how did your family and friends react to when you first got into this industry?
So at the time, very similar to this time and very similar to many other times in my life, I do not have a relationship with my family. And at the time that I got in the industry, I didn't as well. I was out on my own young before I was finished high school, taking care of myself. And, you know, I got the feel of my beautiful Italian family, of the great memories when I was in Italy for that month in 2018. But my family was the first, my immediate mother and father were the first in my dad's family of 11 to get divorced. And that was kind of criminal, like high crime in the 70s in Italian culture for a woman to separate the family. So my mom was kind of isolated, and we were kind of judged in our community and our society for being like those kids, the first from a divorced family with a broken home. My aunts and uncles would tell me what a horrible person my mother was for breaking up a home because they didn't know any different.
Yeah.
Like, look, I can tell you all of the stories of my past, which add up to perfectly land me in the adult industry where I was in search of attention, in search of belonging to something, in search of my own identity, and in search of my own financial future. So it lines up perfectly. But I'm not one to really poke blame. And if you've read my first book, you see that. My second book comes out this December, where I do give a little bit more of my truth. But again, to poke blame to a culture that in the 70s had not yet adapted to a woman being as strong as my mom was and leaving my father, you know, that was really looked down upon. That I'm not going to say they're bad people for doing it, though, because the way I see it is it's all they knew. So the way my life played out was a series of events that probably could have been handled better by everyone around me, but they really didn't have the tools to do better. And the only tool that I had at a young age was I was good enough looking and able to take my clothes off for money at strip clubs, which, you know, not everybody has the balls to do, right? So I took the tools that I had, the obvious factors in my life, and I made them work for me. You can make lemonade out of lemons. And guess what? You don't have to blame people. You don't have to be angry about your past. Everything happens for a reason. And honestly, I wouldn't change any of it. Sure, we'd like to have better relationships with family if you don't. But everything happens the way it's supposed to. I got to travel the world and see so many different faces and places and meet so many people. And it's been cool to look back, especially during the pandemic when the world was closed. I was able to look back and go, wow, you know, I actually met people in Australia. I've actually can communicate them with that on Twitter and see that they're good. Like, I've been around the world. So my family and I weren't talking then. And then by the time we were talking, I was able to kind of explain to them my choices, but they never supported it. And I get that too, because it's not an easy thing to support, though they could have supported me and said, hey, she's a good person. She's not in jail. She's not doing anything illegal. She's paying her own way. She's saving for her future. But again, I think it was just out of their mindset to be able to process all of this information. So I've been on my own. I've had a rocky at best relationship with my parents. They come and go in my life. We haven't had anything together since 2015. And since all of my grandparents have now passed away, and a neighbor that was my mother, father, and everything to me who passed away also, there's no need for me to go back home anymore. I secretly go home to visit my friends from high school, but I don't visit my family. I go to all the cemeteries, visit my nana, my nanu. Like, I do all the things that I'm supposed to do, but they haven't supported me as a person, and they don't communicate me, which has been probably 50% of my life by now. So I'm used to it, and I find the good, and I look back at the positive, and I also want everybody to know that not everybody has the mental capability to adapt quickly and handle situations properly. So when things are said, you don't always have to take them as the most worst experiences ever. Things happen. But I do believe that my Italian family is filled with a ton of love, and they just really did not take my parents' divorce well at all. And that kind of affected us forever.
Kind of glad you said that, because that's something we preach with the page a lot, is just really being proud of your background and just owning everything that comes along with it. That's why, like, we kind of poke fun at the stereotypes and stuff. It doesn't really offend us. We just like joking about it. I was going to say too, like, there's making it work for you, but there's also the amount of success you had in the industry is crazy. I'm pretty sure there was some stat I saw like you're the number one most popular porn star of all time. Like how do you know what I mean? How did you make it above and beyond like with what you did?
I think it was really just like anything else. No matter what we do, consistency is key. So if you think about when you're watching a girl that you like, right, and you like everything about her, the most important thing that she can do to hold you as a fan and to bring on other fans is to not change anything about her. So what you'll notice is I have no tattoos. I never changed my hair color. I never really changed anything about my look, piercings, anything, because I already had gathered this fan base. So now I just needed to keep them, cater to them, and then let it grow. And I think when I've seen girls shoot up and drop off and shoot up and drop off, a lot of it is, changing something that like, hey, if men have a preference for brunettes and you go blonde, you're probably not going to have that same following. And now you're gathering in this following, and then you're going to go back to being a brunette. So consistency. I don't think I do better scenes than somebody else. I don't think there's anything that I do that is like amazing, because when I'd be on set with other girls, I would always say to the director, like, everybody does better scenes than me. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Everybody is better at this than me. But I stayed popular because I stayed true to my original look, and I continued to stay my attitude as well, my lifestyle as well. I did get a tattoo on the back of my neck in the 90s. In the 90s, we were not allowed to have tattoos in the business, so all of us girls went through this rebellious phase, and we put them under our hair on the back of our neck. Then I realized when I'm like in a spin class with my hair in a ponytail, the house mom behind me thinks I'm a gangbanger because I have like scripture on the back of my neck. So I got the tattoo removed, which took 3 years. I will never get another one. But I think it's just that basic. It's consistent, and knowing who you are. I've always known that I'm an entertainer and that I like to talk to people. So when I would go to clubs, the easiest thing about my gig, like dancing was fun. I love dancing. I love the music, everything else. But the easiest part was standing after my shows at my merch table, talking to people, doing trade shows, having conversations, because you remember the conversations you've had the very next time. It could be a year later. I'll walk into that same club, be in the same mindset, see that same guy and be like, oh, his daughter was getting married last time I saw him. Or, oh, his kids were going to college. Like, I'll bring it up. And he'll be like, how'd you remember that? Because I'm present. I never drank when I was on the road. I don't party when didn't party on the road. None of those things. So I was able to like really enjoy just the human experience. And that's truly the Italian in me. That is the Italian to me. We're nosy women. We are so nosy. Like, all my Italian aunts, we would sit around the police scanner, right? We would read. In my hometown of Easton, Pennsylvania, divorces go in the newspaper. DUIs go in the newspaper. So when the Sunday paper would come, the kitchen phone was just ringing off the hook with everybody calling, you see so-and-so's son got a DUI. You see so-and-so filed for divorce. Like, we lived for that. I'm the same. I'm just in a different look, right?
My mom, every day I'll come downstairs in the morning. She's on the phone with my aunt or my uncle or her friends.
Of course.
Oh my God, you see what the neighbors did? Did you see what she was wearing to that point?
Yes.
Oh my God, what a tramp. Like, that's literally what they do.
And it's stereotypical, but it's real. And if you can't, like, looking back on it now, I love it more than I did as a kid. Because as a kid, it was annoying because you knew you weren't going to get away with shit.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know what all of my Italian aunts did? They volunteered at our schools to sit in the hallway and in the cafeteria. Okay. They did that to have a pulse on us and to know what kids were bad so they could all call all of our other aunts and don't let your daughter hang out with this one. Did you know what I saw today at school? Like, they knew who smoked cigarettes. They knew who kept their lunch money. Like, they knew everything.
Hey,
so
but Lisa, you know what though? It's funny. Our parents, they did that. But back in the day, you know what? They did that stuff too. They smoked cigarettes. They did all that stuff. But then then they're hypocrites, because then when we're in that situation and it's like, oh, you did that. It's like, wait, didn't you do that? Me? That's the thing. You ever tell like, for example, if I were to tell my parents, did you do that back then? Me? Are you kidding me? I never did that. Never.
My father would beat me with a belt, they'll tell you, if I did that.
Typical story. I would have been on the street. I would have done this. Yeah, okay, Dad. Yeah, all right.
But there's so much love in the Italian culture, and it's almost forced on you. Yeah. But when you get older, you look back at it in a totally different way as you did when you were little. You hated it as a kid. It was suffocating. You look back now and you're like, oh my gosh. All of us, our Nana was like a mythical feature or like a character. Like you couldn't be around her. And my Nana, so in the summers, I would live at my Nana's house with my cousins. And when I was a teenager, because I was living with my dad, and when he was at work, I would stay with them during the week so that I wasn't home alone. And she would sit in her rocking chair every day and do her rosary beads. Now, we were not allowed to talk to her during this time, but she would never tell us to leave a room. She would never be like that with us. So we would sit on the couch and stare at her. And we would just stare at her, waiting for her to be done, because her life revolved around us. We knew that the second she was done, she was going to make us something to eat. She was going to do something with us. So we would just sit there staring at her. I don't know how she did it, but she was the most amazing woman I'll ever meet, and just like I said, a mythical, amazing. Your Nana calls you, you answer the phone.
It's so nice to hear that and really refreshing, because again, me and Mike grew up with these values too, with our grandparents and stuff. And it's nice to just have that to be family oriented. And I think you said everything so well, even before, about how you pursued, being in the adult film industry, despite not having a good relationship with your family, and like kind of being on your own and independent. I was reading about some, female porn stars who they regret a lot of the things they do, and they kind of get out of the industry. And I think in life, it's good that you said that you never regret anything, and you would never change anything, because you can't think like that, because unfortunately we can't go back in time. So we're going to spend our whole life regretting, when in fact, all we can do is move forward and change what's coming ahead for a better future. Because that's like, for me, for example, I know how it feels to do something sometimes without much support. Like, not good. I've had many good support from my family, but I know how it feels for my friends or people that I went to high school with. They go, "Oh, you're doing a podcast? Oh, what are you gonna do with that? You're getting into acting? What are you gonna do with that?" And I think the thing is, you just said, being true to yourself and consistent. Like, just like you, me and Mike love talking to people. We love conversing. We love meeting new people.
It's the best.
It's the best. And I think that's how you network. That's how you get. Listen, at the end of the day, I love how you said too that, there's people out, I'm not doing anything different. I'm in the industry that many thousands of people do, but people love me because I'm me. Like how you're saying, people love you because you're you, right? That's how you have to be in life, because people are going to remember you, not what you did necessarily.
I agree. How you left a mark on the moment that they had to have a conversation with you, how you made eye contact and stayed present in that moment. Another thing that we all grew up with, and I see on your Insta, is the tomatoes. So we had a couple of acres that we farmed. So that was my life growing up too. I was the one sitting on the stoop, taking all the peas out of the shells so that you could freeze them for the winter, taking the tomatoes. There's nothing better than the smell when you bring in a real tomato, as opposed to when you buy tomatoes at the store. I get my groceries delivered Whole Foods. I can put them on the counter all day. I smell nothing. I go home and pick some tomatoes out of a friend's garden. I bring them back. I smell them for the whole week. Yeah. Now, when I flash forwarded to what we went through in 2020, I have a lot of friends that never were taught how to cook. And I felt so fortunate that I could survive, because your family can say, you can look at the fridge as a kid growing up in an Italian family. Oh, there's nothing to eat here. Nothing to eat. What do you mean? Nothing to eat. Next, the cabinets start opening, pots and pans start coming out, butter starts cooking. And all of a sudden, there's an amazing amount of food.
Yeah.
We learned how to survive. And I think that's another amazing thing that the Italian culture brings into generations. And it's so important. I did not eat one thing takeout for the entire time during the pandemic.
Good for you. Yeah, but actually, I was going to ask you, did you make tomato sauce this year at all, or no?
Not this year, because I didn't have my own garden. But when I do have my own garden, don't you worry. And we, as Italians, we had the bushels outside. Yeah. Anyone that knew us was allowed to go into our garden, whether we were home or not, just grab what they need, because you always have more than you're ever going to use.
Of course.
And I loved that feeling too, that just sharing. That's a big component that I think we're also missing out on, is sharing, and realizing that maybe somebody doesn't have a yard, they're in an apartment, they should be able to walk into your yard if you know them and grab their veggies for the week.
Me and Mike have to give you our addresses after, because you got to send a few tomato sauce jars to us.
And I also have to send you some books.
Yes, I was gonna say, I'm gonna buy a couple, and I'm excited for a new one in December as well. That's gonna be really
Me
interesting.
too. Me too. And for you two, I think everybody should stop. We should stop this here real quick and mention something. When you initially reached out to me through a PR woman that you work with, who I met through a mutual friend, who I think you just interviewed, Lorenzo. That's right.
Yeah,
You just interviewed Lorenzo, who's fantastic. Like such the greatest like Italian how you doing ever when I first got to meet him. So
He's got
I was
Mama
like
Luke
glued
on
to
his
him.
arm. That's how
Yeah,
you
yeah, Mama Luke on his arm. And you had offered to pay me for my time, which I thought was so incredibly kind. I would never accept money for an interview, but when people do offer to pay me, I say, hey, if you'd like to give me a little something, please give it to Blessings in a Backpack, which is a charity that I'm always supporting, gives food to underprivileged children here in the United States on a daily basis. It breaks my heart to know that we cannot feed the children here in our country. And when you made such an incredible donation, I was floored. So I want to know that your parents raised you both so right to not only step up, but step up like 25 million times more than I asked you to step up, but just made a little suggestion. You made a huge donation. I'm so thankful.
Oh, of course. At the end of the day, like, and that's what really stuck out about you was that you're a very humble person. You're not like one to just take advantage of people. I'm like, you know what? If it's gonna go to kids, I might as well. Obviously, they deserve
it's a good
that.
cause.
It's a
And
good
we
cause.
could definitely put a link in the bio too if anyone else wants to donate for sure, and hopefully put a lot more towards it.
So I brought it up because my Nana didn't believe in saving leftovers because she knew that there was always somebody that needed food more than us. And she wanted to live in the south side of Easton, which was a very different area than where a lot of people wanted to live. And she wanted to be sure that she had exposure to people who didn't have as much as us. So when we were done eating, we took all of our pots and pans and all of our food out to her porch. And whoever wanted food came and got food. Nobody ever stole from her. Nobody ever took from her. She never feared. She never locked her door. But she fed every single person that needed something. We always donated our clothes. And so because of her, that's why Blessings in a Backpack is a charity that I truly support.
No, that's so nice, honestly. And
Yeah, she sounds awesome.
yeah, it is
She
awesome.
She was the greatest.
That's amazing. And you know what? It just, but I want to also, before we get into more of that too, I was gonna ask you a question because I know it's a big topic right now, the OnlyFans topic, how it's like they were trying to ban it at first, and then they brought it back. Before I forget, I wanted to ask you about your opinion on that because I wanted to ask you if that OnlyFans, if OnlyFans has kind of changed the adult film industry for the worse or for the better, because I know it's very easy for people to get involved with that now and it's quick money, but is it something that's tangible, something that like you think?
First, I'll start with how the news hit us. So the news, because I recycle my library of almost 30 years of so many scenes and solos and things that I own, and I repurpose that content on OnlyFans. If you're a fan of mine, you want to be in my library every day. You get a new photo set, a new scene, and I got lazy because OnlyFans is easy. It's a very well-run platform. Since they started, they're always upgrading something, always doing something. Now, there were some things I didn't love. They started doing chargebacks, which we were all against, and that was after the Bella Thorne situation because she had posted a DM and it was like $200 to open it, and of course everyone thought it was going to be more than it was, so then they wanted their money back. So then it became, okay, now we're getting hit with chargebacks, which means somebody can go and download your whole library and then cancel and get their money back. So that was frustrating. So that was a bump, that was a blip. But 3 months ago, I read an article in Business Weekly that they were looking for investors, and I did a little research through some mutual people and found out that the owner is very interested in like becoming like a Netflix style, Hulu style, but for creators. Okay, so in other words, he hates money and he's bored. Okay, so now that that seed was planted, I went and set up profiles on all these other sites, and I got to tell you, like the first week, I was like a spoiled, rotten kid. I was like, oh my gosh, this site is so hard to use. It's taking forever to load this call. Oh my gosh, I can't even figure my way around. Like, you're in all these janky, kind of platforms. And I kind of knew this was coming. It's not the credit card processors that are fighting because of the content, because we have great protocol, especially OnlyFans. They have facial recognition. You have to resubmit your IDs and do facial recognition every couple of months to be sure that nobody. Yeah, it's wild. Yo, they do everything to make sure that there's no minors on that platform, that people aren't stealing other people's content and posting it. They do everything to make sure that the creators are safe. So hearing that news the other day was kind of like, okay, I kind of saw this coming. I don't love it, but we've learned to pivot in this industry. It's always been constant changes. So we're always used to laws changing. An election can change the laws for strip clubs, for distribution. Like, it could be that quick. We've all got to adapt. So you're ready to adapt. And then yesterday they put out, like, we're suspending this. Well, that could be October 2nd. Like, they could, suspending does not give me clarity. It still sounds like we're breaking up, but like, I put a tweet out yesterday. It reminds me of when my ex-husband and I decided to go to marriage counseling. Like, we knew we were breaking up, but we wanted to try it one more time. Yeah. That's how I feel. Yeah. But there will be other platforms, and they will become just as successful. OnlyFans did it, so will somebody else. And I think a lot of performers are probably going to move away from OnlyFans because they have a lack of trust. And that's real, right? And it's opened everyone's eyes, and it's made everybody say, okay, maybe I should be more. But the problem is, now you're adding content to 4 sites, so you're spending 7 hours a day doing just that. You still have all of your other stuff to do. Before, you were spending an hour a day just doing OnlyFans. So there's an adaptive time. Now, how do I feel it affects the industry? I think it's very, very positive, because for the performers who weren't using it before, they've learned how to be independent, not just independent contractors, but they've learned how to be their own business, as opposed to being workers where somebody tells you what time you're showing up, what you're doing, who you're doing it with. They became their own creator. Who do I want to work with? What do I want to do? And all the control back in their hands. They had to become more organized. They had to really learn how to work the platform properly. They did live shows, all these little things to keep their fans coming back. And I watched people that I've known for years just really evolve to a real nice routine and really loving working from home, really loving feeling safe health-wise. And it also provided an income for people who never were in this business, never were sex workers, housewives, couples. So that was like awesome too. I think it's a win-win for people to be able to create their own content and put it out there. And I think the reason it became so popular is because your true fan kind of loves that you gave it a stamp of the approval, right? You're the one that said, this is the scene I'm putting up today. Yeah. This is what I'm doing today. And I just feel that there's something there after what happened last year with Pornhub. They had to remove all of those scenes because they weren't properly doing all of these things. And there were scenes up there that shouldn't be there. I think they broke some trust. I think when a fan is going to see something and they're not sure if the person loved doing it, they'll feel better if they're going to their own profile. And the performer gets more money because you're supporting your favorite performer directly. So all the way around, I think it's a win-win. And I love to see people just getting on their hustle during the pandemic, especially those who weren't in the industry, who maybe were servers or in a work position that was just not available. And instead of just waiting for unemployment, they decided like, hey, I'm going to try this. You know what I mean? If this can make me more money for my family, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, because I think we're everyone in life, I think, is reaching for the same goal, which is, I guess, success, right? The broad thing, but we're all on these different paths. And sometimes there's like sub paths within those paths.
Yep.
Like, you mentioned about some people, let's say like a girl was a server and she wanted to try doing OnlyFans, for example, right? If that opportunity wasn't there, who knows how long that path would have brought her to the success, right?
Right.
She can make it really, she can do very well on OnlyFans.
Yep.
There's so many questions I have for you because, like, again, like the porn industry is so it's so interesting to me. Like, for example, I have one question for you about that me and Mike are actually really both interested in is that when you do a scene with somebody, okay, I know most of the time it's acting, but have you ever done a scene with someone and you were like, wow, this guy's really good looking. I don't really have to act for this one. This one's gonna be just like, I'm gonna go with the flow and have fun. Like,
so it was easy for me because I got into the industry at a time where we were treated very differently. So we picked all of the performers that we worked with. So that stayed with me my entire career. So I was excited to go to work with the guys I was working with because I hand selected them. And I had a group of guys that I was comfortable with. And if a new guy came into the business, I would actually go to the guys that I already worked with a lot. And I would say, hey, would I like working with this guy? So, that means I already thought he was good looking, but I just want to know his style because my guys knew me. They knew I didn't like anything too aggressive. They knew all of my little quirks, you know. And so they would say, you know, this guy might be a little bit too rough for you. This guy, you know, might be scared of you. That was always a problem with newer guys, because if they were already fans of mine, oh my gosh, guys would think they wanted to work with me. And then when they got the opportunity, I think what would happen in my mind, this is what I picture, kind of their whole memory of everything they've already watched is spinning in their mind at the same time they're seeing me in person. And I would just see them start to sweat. And I would be like, oh my God, this is good. This is not going to go out well. And I didn't want to ruin their sexual future, because all their friends were going to ask them, how was the scene? And then the guy's like, oh, it didn't happen because I fell apart. Like, I never wanted that. So I was attracted to my performers. And maybe that's another thing that files into the consistency conversation we had earlier. I didn't take chances. You know, there were a couple of times that there was parodies where I was asked to work with somebody because they looked like somebody. We did a Obama rendition of the Who's Nailin' Palin series.
Yes.
I worked with a guy who looked like Obama that I never worked with before. And they put us on the back of this horse. Now, this guy was afraid of horses. That didn't add to it. They did this before the scene, which I suggested, let's do the scene first and let's shoot this pickup after, because if something bad goes wrong with this horse, right? So we're on this cliff on the top of the canyons, and they gave us this tiny little trail. Now, listen, I'm a horse person, but even solo, I don't know if I want to be on a trail this narrow looking down a canyon that's like, if you fall off, you're dying, right?
Yeah.
So the trainers are there. We're dealing with this old school director who, Jerry T, who, bless your heart, I love the man, but he didn't take direction well as a director. And so the trainers are like, okay, just be sure that once we get everything set up, no one's yelling, don't spook the horse. I'm sitting side saddle on the back of this horse with no saddle. Guy, the guy that I was working with, is on the saddle holding on for dear life, and the director screams, action. The horse spooks immediately, throws us both off, runs all the way down this path on the canyon. And then, of course, Guy was too scared to get back on. He's like, that's it, I'm not doing it. So since they paid for the horse and they wanted to still use the horse because we paid this extra money on this horse, what are we going to do? So the director then decides, let's just put the horse near them on the scene. We were doing our scene on a hay bale, right? So we're doing the scene. Of course, I know about horses. So I say to Jerry, I'm like, Jerry, this horse is going to be eating this hay the whole time we're doing this scene. No, it's going to be fine. The horse is just going to stand by. So in that scene, every time the horse would come in to grab some, the male performer would just get spooked again. And because, you know, he's just coming in, grabbing a big thing. Hey, then we'd hear him chewing, like as we're trying to have sex. All this is happening. But the director's insistent it has to be in the frame. We paid a lot of money for this horse. The horse has to stay right there. I mean, it was one of those days that was just like, I had so much empathy for the male performer. We ended up getting the job done, but it was a very long and grueling process. And we became closer friends over that catastrophe than we probably would have if we got hired for a regular scene, because I just said to him, like, I just want us to live through today. Like, I don't want you to get thrown from a horse. But when the woman came over and said, okay, when you want to start, just have somebody go out and wave their hand, the director didn't listen. And then he yells action, and the horse just spooks, stands up, throws us both off, and then takes off. And I'm like, well, you know what? At least we got off safely, and we're not going down that cliff at 90 miles an hour with that horse.
That had to be one of the crazier, like, is that the craziest thing that's ever happened on scene or what?
It's one of the crazier things because there were so many elements to it. You know what I mean? There was just layers and layers and layers of element. I remember getting there and pulling up this canyon. I loved going to different locations, you know, scoping out the house, checking out the view. You know, imagine a girl from Pennsylvania who never even saw mountains like that, or a West Coast ocean sunset. To me, everything was an adventure. So I always got to set early so I could be nosy and I could check out this whole house, you know, see where they'd let you go. Sometimes areas were blocked off and I'd like want to just sneak in, just look in their room and all that. You know, just to be curious. And so I remember showing up and looking at the horses, and then they had us sign this waiver. And when I was handed a waiver about like dying on a horse, I was like, things just got escalated here. Like, I'm signing my life away. I'm just getting out of my car. You're putting a waiver on my trunk, which means you don't want me to read it.
Yep.
You don't want me to know why I'm signing this. And I cannot go any further into the makeup room or anything else until I sign this. And they're like, yeah. And I was like, oh, okay, you know what? I'm ready. I'm ready for this.
That is so funny.
It was just a wild day. And more than anything, it's easier for the female performer. For a guy, imagine trying to get it together to perform with all of those elements, and a horse just constantly coming in and taking what we then called our mattress. Like, this horse is eating our mattress because we're like doing the scene on this hay.
How can you even focus like at that point? It's just like,
Yeah, he was probably scared the entire time.
I give him so much credit, but yeah, that was one of the more wild, like, behind the scenes. I think we should have just been shooting all behind the scenes and just released it, because there was so much chaos that day that the sex scene is the last thing I remember about the day. I just remember everything that went up to it. I remember them putting me in this princess dress and then just having me sitting on the back of the horse. I'm like, it's never good for the horse for me to just sit back here like this. I should be, like, no, it's going to be fine. And I remember thinking, like, this is not going to be fine, but I'm going to be fine. And that's all that matters. I will be fine. I'm not afraid, but it was nuts.
that is so cool. I was gonna ask you a couple of things. We want to do a cool segment with you actually before we end off the show today too, about you kind of debunking 3 myths from the porn
Ooh,
industry.
this is good. Let me get
Yeah,
my
this
thinking cap on. Thinking cap
Look
is
better for
on.
this,
Okay.
actually. So actually, Mike, do you want to do one, then I do one? Or do you want to go back and forth? We have 3 of them, so
Yeah, so the one I was gonna ask is about the guys. Like, what do they do to last the entire time? Do they ejaculate before and then do it? Do they like do
Take
multiple
something?
scenes? Do they take something beforehand? Like,
It's
you
a
know what I
mix
mean?
of both. And most of the guys will tell you that they've trained for this. Like, they start training at home, timing out their situations. Okay. So when you're newer, sure. But we really would rather them not do it at home first, because the better the pop shot, the better. So we want that first pop shot of the day. So like, we like to know that that's not the element, right? Now, in the 90s, there was no Viagra, anything of that nature. So what they did for us back then was, each time we switched a position, they had to relight the whole entire set. It's because we were shooting on film. You don't have a handheld. You know what I mean? You have this massive camera so they had to relight everything. So they would always provide the talent a little side bedroom where you two could stay connected. So we would be having even more sex. I have no idea how the guys in the 90s did it, because a scene would take like 2 hours to shoot. And though we'd break for water, sometimes they'd go and eat some lunch. They'd be able to, it's a mental game. These guys have it takes a very unique mindset to be able to do this for a living. I heard a great analogy on my podcast from my friend Jonathan Morgan, who's been talent director and now an agent. He said, being a male performer is like going up to bat in the big leagues. And if you don't hit a home run, you're going back to the minors. You have to hit a home run every time.
Yeah.
Because so you all know, if there's no pop shot, nobody on set gets paid.
Are you serious?
No.
Wow.
That's the completed product. No, we don't get paid. We have to go back and make it up. Usually for no pay. Oh, yeah. No, we don't get paid if the guy doesn't come through. So there's that.
Literally unfigured.
Wow.
Yes,
That
there's
important.
that. So that's a big one. But so the guys do prepare themselves. And also, it's a lot easier now shooting on a handheld, because there's not as many lights. You'll notice more scenes where they use natural light, these big houses with nice open windows. That helps a lot. It's not as hot for the male performer. But if you're a good female performer, you stay connected from the time you start shooting pictures till it's over, to be sure that you're giving your guy enough attention to also add in helping him staying focused and being able to complete the scene.
Wow. Well, that's a good one. We have another one too about, is it a myth or is it true that female porn stars make more money than male porn stars?
It is true. I'm very happy that I was part of the workforce where women get paid more, because we're still fighting for women's equality today when it comes to the pay scale in the rest of the world. So yes, we do get paid more. Now, there are some male performers who have started to get paid as much, if not more, because they are that good. And I believe that they deserve it because they are that good. So, but I would say the majority, 95% of the women are making more money than the men.
Wow. Okay.
I'm sorry, guys.
And the third myth is that people think it could be unsafe to be in the industry just because it's unprotected. What are your thoughts on that?
So it could be unsafe because there's always risks anytime you do anything unprotected. But the industry does test every 2 weeks for 7 different types of STDs as well as HIV. And the HIV test is a double-backed HIV test. So it's an instant blot, and then it's a also test where it can give the numbers, whereas if somebody was taking medication for HIV, it would be undetectable with some tests that they have it still in their system. And this is pure. So also as a performer, if you work with guys like I did that work a lot, I would pay for them to retest the day before I shot with them, and then they could use that test for the next 14 days. So, you know, if they're working every 2 weeks, 5 days a week, and I'm only working once a week, I don't want that exposure. But one of the things that is something for everybody to be aware of is that, you know, we're having a bit of an epidemic in some states right now with an increase of HIV numbers. The population under 35, 1 out of 5 people now has herpes. So out in the real world, I think people are less aware because we do test so often. You know, it's 100 to 150 times a year you're testing. At times, you know, if you're shooting a lot of different things, you're going. So for some of these guys, they might test every 4 days if they're shooting a ton, or if they're doing different scenes for girls like myself who had them retest. And it keeps us on top of it. I think I've still continued to test being out of the business, and I'm a big advocate, and I wish more people would just say once a year they're going to test, or twice a year they're going to test, even if you've been using a condom, because there are still some things that you can contract. Yeah. And for your female listeners, you now have to request an STD test when you go to your yearly gyno exam. They used to just be thrown in, but now you actually have to request them because insurance wanted to try to save some money there. You should always be requesting that. Your insurance will pay it. It is your right to get it. It is something that you should know. We should all know our status. And this way we can bring that number back down, because to me, 1 out of 5 is an awful number for an STD, and it's not something we want to see.
High.
I know.
No
There's a lack of communication, a lack of wanting to disclose that type of information, but it's very important to share your truth and protect the person that you're going to be with.
Tell us a little bit too, just kind of how you transitioned out of the industry and what you're doing now with your podcast and your book, and just more information about you, you know?
So in 2013, I was doing a radio show for SiriusXM called Stripper Town. It was a Monday night show. It was so much fun. People would just call in with stories of like random stuff that happened to them at strip clubs over the weekend, which was amazing. Nonstop content, a content machine. But it was during it was Monday night. So during football season, when the Monday night game was on, my fans that would meet me at the clubs would get through my screener. They would tell them they had a story about a strip club, and then they would tell me the score of the game, like what was happening at the game, because I didn't have TVs in that studio. And I kept kind of getting in a bit of trouble with my producer. I kept getting in a bit of trouble because that wasn't what it was Sirius, it was Playboy Radio, then it was Spice Radio, but they didn't really want sports talk. Yeah. And on my last night of getting in trouble, my producer said, hey, a friend of mine had Playboy Playmates doing a fantasy football show on Fantasy Sports Radio, and the show just broke up, but he still would like to have something. You should go and meet with him. That was all I needed. I flew to New York. I met with my boss. I worked for Sirius for 7 years. I just left in May to pursue getting more involved and more invested in sports betting. So a lot of my sports conversation will be at Bovada on Instagram this season. I'll be doing lives every single game day, halftimes. I have guests. I do some solo podcasts are both available on my YouTube, or you can listen as well as the Lisa Ann Experience and also Dudes Do Better. My new book comes out in December, really about how much my life has changed since I retired and what I've really learned about myself through minimalism, through traveling to Italy, and through simplifying my life. So everything is at The Real Lisa Ann, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Insta, Twitter, Facebook. And this year on Sundays, I'm going to do start sits to help everybody set their fantasy football lineup. I'm going to do them live on YouTube because I think it would just be so fun to just sit there. Because, you know, it's so stressful Sunday mornings. You're like, you have that one position where you have like 3 stud running backs. You're only starting 2, and you just can't make a decision. So you listen to one show and they recommend the one guy. Then you listen to another show, they recommend the other guy. You're losing your mind. That's where I'm going to come into play.
Well, because you're a queen. That's why you know.
That's awesome.
You know what's best.
I love fantasy. It's such a great escape, especially when I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan.
So
Your team.
So am I.
Okay, we haven't done well since you were a baby, okay? Like, it's been since the 90s. Were you even here yet, okay? Like, how old are you?
90. I was born in 99, so 22.
Okay, so close, but we were starting to decline in 99, okay?
Yeah.
So I think fantasy just allows you to still really fully embrace the sport, and when your team loses, it's okay, because you still have your fantasy team that you're going with, so it's a great escape.
Yeah, true.
That's
Yeah, it
awesome.
keeps it interesting every week for sure. And
It sure
I don't know,
does.
very impressed with just all the different realms you're in and
Yeah.
how you just been transitioning. I think it's awesome, Lisa. So
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this today, Lisa. Honestly, it was a pleasure speaking with you, and you're such a great person. And honestly, like we have to do this again sometime in the future because it was a great opportunity talking with you.
Yeah, and you guys, if you have a single older cousin, maybe a single uncle, I want pure Italian at this point. I don't care if they live here or over there.
I'll make some
Keep me
calls.
in mind. Keep me in mind. Like, I'm just looking, and it would preferably if they lived over there, it would be even better because then I'm definitely going to learn the language.
Yeah.
All of this. So just think about it. Good food for thought. I will take the trip and meet someone for sure.
Of course, of
you have to
course.
see up. There's probably about 400 guys I know that would take that up. So
Definitely.
Okay, well, and I'm going to trust you, Mike, to do the screening. Get it down to 100. We'll line them all up when I get there. We'll do gelato with one, coffee with the other, cigarette with another. Like, we'll just mix it all up, okay?
Have a nice Heineken.
That's
and that's-